homesteading between an herb-covered orchard and a dusty mesa, where he learned a lot about what plants need to thrive. His experience growing cannabis deepened his relationship to the soil, discovering how much the life
Momento,
below the
trabajo con la
plants
tierra
impacts their potential
y
for growth
aprendiendo
and
para el
vitality.
potencial de lo que puede utilizar con la
Compost tea is
tierra.
a microbial
El trabajo de
extract
compost,
that
sí,
increases
trabajo con los microbios que
phytonutrients, the
incrementan los
minerals in your
nutrientes.
food by feeding the soil to increase soil vitality. This method is based on Elaine Ingram's research and teaching. So his talk is called Exploring the Soil Food Web with Compost Tea, and it includes a demonstration. And I will turn it over to you, Che. You have your mic.
Right. Yep. All right. Nice to meet you all. Glad you guys came. This is so back. I'll kind of give you a little history of my own personal experience with compost tea. I moved out to California around 2008.
En
Kind of
2008,
involved with the
para involucrarme ahí con
medical marijuana
la
industry.
industria médica de
And
marihuana.
growing and learning about the needs of cannabis as well as many other plants and just general agriculture of how to grow food in large yields and kind of small plots of land. I came across some amazing teachers that were
Algunos grandes maestros que
students of
conocí,
Learning England.
estudiantes de Learning
And
England.
basically, I
Básicamente,
would purchase
yo
this
compraba
tea that they would show
este
up with
té
their truck
que
with
ellos
a similar
traían en
sized
su
barrel
camión con un
in the
barril
back of their
similar a
truck,
ese
and they
tamaño.
would, sell me their tea
Y
for
ellos me
like,
vendían su té por,
sometimes like, I think it was like
creo que a veces eran
$30
como
a
$30
gallon or something crazy.
por galón.
And at first I started just buying from them, and
Comencé a
then
comprar de
we
ellos
started catching on
y
that
luego
like,
comencé a
oh, we
captar
can just
eso
make this stuff in our
de que
own
podíamos
backyard. We don't
producirlo
need, we
en nuestro propio
build a
hogar.
brewer or purchase a brewer.
No tenemos que
So
comprar
then
una cervecera o nada para
I
hacer
started
eso.
talking to the guys that were delivering,
Comencé a
and
hablar
they
con
decided they wanted to
los
sell me a
tipos
brewer. They
quienes
kind of got over the
no
delivery business
estaban ahí
of moving around
produciendo
this
esto y
bubbling
querían vender
liquid
este
tea.
líquido del té
And
que
the guy
estaban
that I
produciendo.
first met that was teaching me,
El
he
primer señor
literally
que
like
conocí que me
tried to
enseñó
prove
esto,
to me
él
that it
trató
was
de
like super
comprobarme que
good by
era
literally drinking
muy
it,
bueno
which is I would
bebiéndolo,
not recommend.
lo cual yo no recomendaría eso.
But it has a lot of similar stuff
Sí
in
tiene
it as what
productos
our
similares
gut biome
para
has, so
lo que
there's
tiene
a lot of
la
bacillus, there's a
salud
lot of
del
beneficial
estómago,
microbes in there,
muchos microbios que nos son beneficiantes para
beneficial
el cuerpo,
protozoas,
protozoos,
nematodes, which
beneficiantes,
I
nematodes,
wouldn't recommend eating too
lo
many of,
cual
like
no
little
recomendaría
miniature worms
mucho,
that you can't see.
ya que son pequeños
So
gusanos invisibles para el
in
ojo.
that, I started going deep into
Ahí
that, and
comencé a
I took some
profundizar más en
classes with these
esto.
guys, and they basically
Básicamente ahí
showed me how to make
ellos nos mostraron
a
cómo
really
poder
powerful
preparar
tea that was
un té poderoso
literally double
que
to
literalmente era
quadrupling my
duplicaba,
yields,
cuadruplicaba
not only just
mis
with my
producciones,
marijuana, but
no
like I would
solamente con
put
mi
it on my
marihuana, pero
raspberries
también
or
si los ponía en mis
tomatoes or
moras,
whatever I was growing in my backyard, and it would
tomates
just
en mi jardín,
unbelievably produce
tenía
large
una
amounts of
producción
food.
maravillosa
And the food would
y todos los alimentos que se
often
producían,
have way more flavor
muchos veces tenían
and more
más
bright
sabor,
colors, because the minerals and nutrients from the compost tea make it bioavailable for the plant to uptake. So you get way more growth, you get more flowers, you get the whole thing without really adding a traditional agricultural NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. You're basically adding microbes to the soil that then bring in the nitrogen or break down the sand, literally, and turn it into phosphorus, feeding it sand or rocks. The mycelium will literally eat the sand and rocks, and then it'll make it more bioavailable for the plants. Because there's phosphorus everywhere, but it doesn't necessarily mean your plants are going to uptake it. There's like hundreds of varieties of phosphorus, and some of those phosphorus varieties pretty much need mycelium to break it down and make it bioavailable for the plant. So these guys were telling us like we don't need to add as much NPK. You can and do that essentially, but you can do back and forth NPK, like fertilizer, compost tea, fertilizer, compost tea. But most fertilizers, even organic ones, are too much salts, and they kill the microbiome in the soil. So it takes a while then for the soil to rebuild. But when you use compost tea, you literally are inoculating back the microbiome and getting amazing yields.
poder producir
Elaine Ingham
grandes resultados.
is one of the major pioneers in this. our
Lynn
friend
es uno de
Bob,
los pioneros principales
Farmer
aquí,
Bob Patterson.
el Farmer
He's
Bob
not here
Henderson,
right
que no
now.
está
He
aquí
thought you'd be here, but he worked
actualmente.
with Delaney and
Él trabajó
had the
conmigo.
honor to work with her on
Yo
some projects
tuve el honor de poder trabajar
in
con él
Texas. So
también en
he's been
proyectos.
filling me on a lot more information.
Él
He's
me
a
ha
real
actualizado mucha más
teacher and has a
información.
lot of experience with that.
Un maestro
He
con más
actually showed me how
experiencias.
to create trichoderma, which is another form of
De la
another
Microderma,
type of
que es otro tipo ahí de,
another type of mushroom.
otro tipo de hongos.
So basically,
Básicamente,
mycorrhizas are a form of
los
mushrooms. They're
microbios
not
son
fruiting.
forma de
They don't
hongos,
fruit above ground. They
alimentos,
fruit below ground. They kind of
tierra por encima
attach themselves to a
y
root,
debajo,
and then they extend
que
their
se
roots
conectan
sometimes
a una
many
raíz
feet.
y a
And
veces
you'll see it when you
crecen
dig up a
semillas.
very healthy plant. You'll see these little
Una planta
webbings
saludable
that come off of the roots.
que se
And
generan ahí de las
a lot of
raíces
people might think it is a part of
y
the
eso forma
plant, but
parte
it's
ahí de
actually
la
not.
planta.
It's its own entity,
Termina siendo
essentially,
su
and
propia
it will
entidad
take nutrients
y
from
quita nutrientes de
the ground and then feed it to
el piso
the plant, as
cuando
well
se
as
alimenta
it'll
la
actually
planta y
communicate
también comunicará
with
con otras
other fungus families,
otras
fungi.
familias
It'll
ahí de
communicate with the
hongos,
other fungi,
comunicándose
that
con
will
esos
also
hongos y
take
eso
from,
también
like, so if a
generará,
tree has
si un
excess
árbol tiene exceso de
nutrients of any sort,
nutrientes,
it could actually take
uno
from the
puede
tree and go
llevar del
through
árbol y atravesar
the mycorrhiza
de
from
los
the tree
microbios del
to the
árbol
mycelium,
hacia el
back to the
hongo y de
mycorrhiza to the
vuelta hacia
plant, and then
la
feed it to
planta
the plant.
y luego
And
alimentarse
one
a
of
la
the
planta.
clear sightings of this that we see
Una de las cosas más
in
claras que
old
vemos
growth
aquí
forests is
en los
saplings
bosques
that get no sunlight.
son de las
Well,
plantas
they've
quienes
actually
no
been able to
reciben
trace the
luz del sol
nutrition that these
y
saplings are
han
getting no
podido
sunlight,
calcular
but they're
la
growing
nutrición que
really healthy
reciben
as if they're in full sun.
y terminan
You see this in the
creciendo
redwoods,
el
you see this in
tamaño
the Washington
de
state,
otras
all through the old
especies de
growth
árboles.
forests.
Vemos eso en bosques como en
Well,
Washington,
basically, the
donde
grandmother trees or
básicamente
grandfather trees that are like sometimes up
los
to a
abuelos
mile
abuelos,
away
cuando están como
will have
alejados por una
excess
milla,
nutrients from getting way
pueden
too much
acceder
sun
a
on top of a
nutrientes
hill or
de lo que
whatever, and
consumen
then
el
they
sol
will feed that
y pueden
nutrition
alimentar esa
through
nutrición a
the
través de
ectomycorrhiza into the
las raíces
mycelium,
hacia
and
los
then feed
hongos
it to the
y alimentándose a los árboles más jóvenes
and or even to other plants,
o hasta otras
which is
plantas también
endomycorrhizas.
en esos microbios.
And I'm going to go a little bit more into what ecto, what
Voy a
endo
repasar un
is,
poco más
what
la
beneficial
diferencia
is,
entre
what non-beneficial,
los
what aerobic is, what
ectohongos
anaerobic
y
is.
endohongos
These are all kind of
y
important
que
things to
son
know when you're
cosas importantes
kind of
para
diving deep
reconocer
into
cuando
the
uno
soil
analiza
biology.
la biología de la tierra en general.
Let's see, I kind of have, let's see. So I'm kind of basically, I'm going to add a little bit of this seaweed because it can, this soluble seaweed to the water here. All these ingredients that I have here,
Tengo
you
aquí,
might think, oh, you have to go to a
tal vez
store
uno
and buy
piense,
it, but it's actually not necessarily true.
uno tiene que ir a
Even though
comprarlos.
this is ocean soluble
No
seaweed,
necesariamente,
this is probably one
aunque
of
esa es una de las
the
algas
microbes'
esenciales,
favorite foods.
otras
If you were
las
trying to
comidas para
make
los
this
microbios.
locally, you
Si uno
could
trata de
use
producir esto,
comfrey or even algae from the bottom of a pond, like high dense nutrient plants, nettles, things like this. You can soak them for a couple days and make like a kind of an anaerobic brew, and then you can create something really similar to what this is, and with a high potassium. But mostly it's the micronutrients that we're going for. We're not really going for the NPK here. We're going for the micronutrients that are inside of the soluble seaweed. This is kind of an easy way to do it. You can go to any garden store. Oftentimes you
uno
get
puede ir a
this
las
brand. There's
tiendas
other
y a
brands of
comprar
soluble
esas
seaweed.
marcas que
You
les
want to make
venden
sure there's
esas
very little
algas
nitrogen or
con
phosphorus
nitrógeno,
in this.
sin
That way,
fósforo,
it's like pure, and you want to check the
sin
ingredients, make
nitrógeno,
sure it's not mixed with other things.
para asegurarse que no se
Unless
mezclado
they're
con otras
beneficial
cosas
for the tree
y ese es el
plant.
beneficio
But because it takes like
para esa
probably
producción,
5 minutes or so
ya que
to
requieren unos
properly
5 minutos
absorb.
para
So
calcularlo ahí con la tierra.
this I will like, you can mix,
Uno puede ahí mezclar,
for this size barrel, they recommend about a half cup.
ellos
I've
recomiendan
done
para un barril
even
de este
more.
tamaño, medio.
A lot of times I eye it and just kind of give it a, so it gets, this stuff will stick to the sides of the tank. It will stick to your hands. It'll literally make the cracks in your hands black for days. So you don't want to massage this one into the water. I used to do that, but it's terrible for your skin, really. The other way again is to
Piel
make
de
a
la
high
persona.
concentration of comfrey
También no pueden mantener
or
bastante concentración de
nettles or any other
Humphrey
very high
y
nutrient dense
otras
plant.
plantas de alta
Moringa, there's a
densidad,
bunch of
y
them out there in
Renga.
the world. But comfrey is probably the more common one
Humphrey
here.
probablemente es la más
There's
común.
also
Se utiliza en
some
esto.
relatives to comfrey like
Y hay otros parientes a Humphrey como
dang it, borage.
Borage.
There's a couple different borage relatives too in this local
Otros
area that grow
parientes de
wild.
Borage aquí en
You
esta
could also use
zona
borage family
local y
stuff
tanto
that also has
silvestre
very high nutrient dense
tienen mucha densidad nutricional.
in there. So I'm gonna let that sit for a second so it gets fully absorbed.
Voy a dejar que se mezcle ahí y que se absorba totalmente.
So what does compost tea basically do? I guess I kind of already said it, but it basically we're really focusing on the soil, not the plants. Because if the soil is super active, super nutrient dense, the plants are going to thrive way beyond your expectations. Plants that
Plantas que
I would see in the
yo
marijuana
diría,
industry, I would
como la industria de
grow
marihuana, y
plant.
yo cultivaría
Maybe I can get a
plantas.
pound out of
Entonces
that
puedes
soil
recibir
mass
una libra ahí de esa
by
masa.
adding the compost tea with the same soil
Planta,
mass.
agregando
I could
esa,
probably get
el
two
té,
pounds if
puede,
I
puede
expand the soil
duplicarlo
mass,
2
especially with
libras
marijuana.
para duplicar la producción de
Has a lot
marihuanas,
of outward roots.
ya que tienen
I could
muchas raíces
increase that
externas
same
y puede
plant that
incrementar
I would
esa
get
misma
like
planta
maybe a pound from
que me
up to like
produciría tal
5
vez
to 8
una libra
pounds,
hasta tal
which is
vez
insane
5 o
because
8
we're talking
libras.
like a
Inmensa esa
15-foot
producción.
to 18-foot plant. You need scaffolding sometimes to
A
get to the
veces
top
podemos
to
poner que
deal
sea
with
hasta
it.
18 pies.
Things sometimes when they get too big, it's
A
almost
veces
too much
podemos
work.
agrandarla demasiado, por lo
Super
tanto,
powerful
que requiere mucho trabajo, muy poderoso el crecimiento.
with pests, especially. So
Con las
there's
plagas,
what they
particularmente,
call trichoderma.
están los
I didn't
trichodermas.
purchase any
Y
items with trichoderma, but Bob is an amazing master of
Bob
trichoderma. I've seen
es
him
un muy buen
culture
maestro.
it really well and then literally screen it and make his own trichoderma extract. So trichoderma is not a mycorrhiza. Mycorrhizas but it acts similar, except mycorrhizas grow on the roots, like I talked before, and there's two different kinds. One's endo and one's ecto. Ecto are for trees, for hard roots, bushes, maybe strawberries, anything that's like a hard brown root is an ecto. Endos are endoderma, ectoderma. Endomycorrhizas are grass, marijuana, tomatoes, squash, corn. Like most of our vegetables are endo, maybe even all, actually probably all vegetables. The berries are all in the ecto family. But again, they communicate with each other. So
Y los se
when you're
comunican ahí
trying to
juntos, como
inoculate,
estamos tratando de inocular
say a field of an agricultural
un
field
campo
or even
agrícola
your own backyard,
o el
you want to
jardín
have a little bit of endo
de
and a
alguien
little bit of
localmente,
ecto, because you
queremos
don't
una
really
mezcla
know
de indo y ecto.
if the local willow or the local plants are getting excess nutrients, and if they are, they could be actually feeding your plants, literally, which is pretty impressive and magical in many ways. And there's a bunch of information about this online. Under the soil food web, you can type in, learn so much more about how all this process works. But endo mycorrhiza and ectomycorrhiza don't go crazy in water, right? So we're not gonna put the mycorrhizas in here, and that's why I don't have it on the ingredients list until right at the very end. So tomorrow we're going to give out this tea. So if anyone has an empty gallon or whatever, they can take it home and experiment with it. It lasts about 4 to 5 hours, as long as it's not a hot car. If it's a hot car, it might only last about an hour.
No, si está en el vehículo caliente,
And
tal vez
we're
solamente
talking
dure
about the bacteria, the
donde las
protozoa, and the nematodes,
portions,
like bacillus
nematodes,
and all the other bacteria
las demás
that are
bacterias
coming
que
out
hay
of
que
the
salen de
worm castings and out of the
esa
mushroom
zona
compost.
del compost de
And so the
hongos.
mushrooms won't really go
Los
expand too much
entonces
in
no van a
here.
expandirse
You're pretty
demasiado
much just
aquí.
you're spreading out their spore structure, so when it's in the water, it spreads. But they don't die off in here. When a mycorrhiza is more sensitive, and it needs more direct feeding. So what they've learned in the last 15-ish years is that mycorrhizas are best to be added in right at the end, because this is the food for the mycorrhiza, the fish, the kelp or comfrey, and such. So that's Yeah, so you want to be able to feed the mycorrhizas immediately when you add them in. If you're doing a large plot of land, like a large agricultural plot, you want to make sure the ground is well moistened and there is some sort of basic broken down plant matter in that soil for everything to grab onto. And you can dilute this, like 50 gallon can be diluted into like 500 gallons literally, or you can go direct, but also you really don't need much. And then the mycorrhiza you want to add right at the end to inoculate into the soil, otherwise it won't survive. Essentially, it needs something to grab onto. That's ideally a broken down plant matter or roots that are living. Because if they're living, it's going to take in right away, and overnight you'll see change in your plants, especially with the mycorrhizas, and they will increase in your soil 100-fold with the food in there. If you
Con los
don't have the
alimentos
food
ahí.
in there, the
Si no tienen
mycorrhiza
alimentos
might
ahí,
only
el mycorrhiza tal
very
vez
slowly
normalmente
increase,
lentamente puede
as the season
incrementar
goes on, and it might decrease if you let
mientras
the
avanza la
soil dry
temporada
too much.
y tal vez pueda disminuir en
So
su
to really get the
crecimiento
full maximum
para obtener el
potential out of
crecimiento
your
máximo
mycorrhizas,
posible de los mycorrhizas.
here, I'm going to pass this around
Yo voy a
so
pasar
people can
esta,
look at the different
esta lata aquí para que
endomycorrhizas
todos
and
puedan ver distintos
ectomycorrhizas.
endo y
It's really fine writing. You might need to take a picture.
ectomycorrhizas. Es pequeño y todos tienen que tomar una
The
fotografía.
glomus family. There's a bunch of different
La familia Lomas, hay
families in
distintas
there.
familias incluidas ahí.
Some of the mycorrhizas
Algunos de los mycorrhizas
build the immune system
generan un
by
sistema
giving it all the
inmunológico,
nutrients the plant needs.
dándole
You
todos
can
los nutrientes que
communicate with the
necesitan las
plant what it
plantas para
needs, and it
comunicarse
will
con
build
la
it by
planta,
giving it certain micronutrients that
sobrevivir,
get the plant up to a
para actualizar la planta.
full strength. Others will retain water, so the water doesn't evaporate. They'll actually kind of create a webbing to keep the water in the ground, which is pretty impressive. The other really beautiful thing I love about mycorrhizas is people talk a lot about like carbon sequestration from the trees and the plants, but the reality is without the mycorrhizas, those carbons actually just go right back into the air, into the atmosphere. They don't actually get locked in as well. I mean, there's a little bit that get locked in with the rotting decay of roots, but the mycorrhizas, when they're attached to the trees or the plants, they actually store the carbons in the ground. And after the tree dies, those carbons stay there, and the mycorrhizas will then search for more living plants, more living trees, to then keep storing more carbon. So it's one of the biggest ways to carbon sequestrate, to bring the carbon levels down in the air, if we're worried about that. Some people aren't, is by integrating mycorrhizas into your general gardening plots and stuff, because you're going to be able to actually trap a lot more carbons and increase your soil vitality, because those carbons are also what you want in the ground to create a really healthy
Pisos
rich
para
soil.
poder crear esas tierras ricas y nutrientes.
Mycorrhizas generally feed
Los
mostly
mycorrhizas
on
típicamente se alimentan directamente
amino
en
acids
los
and
ácidos de amino,
micronutrients,
los
and
micronutrientes,
that's why we would use
y
the
por eso es que
seaweed,
utilizaríamos
comfrey,
las algas,
and the fish.
Humphrey y
So
los peces.
fish
Los
hydrolysate,
peces,
you can't use fish
y
emulsion because they
no
take
pueden
out
utilizar
the
los peces en
fats
emulsión porque
and the
ellos quitan
oils,
grasas y aceites,
which removes a
la
lot
cual
of
quita
the
mucho
beneficial amino acids that
de
the
los ácidos aminos beneficiantes que los mycorrhizas y los hongos necesitan para prosperar en ese ambiente.
So you really do need
Entonces uno necesita
fish
tener
hydrosylate, or
hidróxido de
literally, we did
peces,
this for the last demo I
o
did,
en la
is
última
we
demostración
cut
que
up the
hice,
fish and we blend it
ahí
up in a
cortamos algunos
Vitamix,
peces
and
y
just make a
mezclamos
puree
ahí
of the
con
bones, the
vitaminas,
guts, everything in there.
todos
And
los
that
huesos,
is basically exactly what fish hydrosylate is.
los
So
órganos
the idea is to
y la diosa de fósforo que
get the
necesitaban los
full
peces. La idea
spectrum
entonces
of
es
the
para
fish,
poder ver el
instead,
spectrum total.
not the emulsion, because the emulsion, they basically take out a lot of good stuff out of there, and that's one of the reasons it's a lot cheaper than fish hydrosylate. So yeah, that would make the mycorrhizas go wild and the fungus go wild, as well as the protozoa, nematode, and the beneficial bacterias. I'm going to go into bacterias for a second. When you have something that's sitting for a long time, water, a swamp, maybe sewage, these kind of things, they're building anaerobics, bacterias. Some anaerobics can be good, and but most aren't. But when you dump an anaerobic into a beneficial area, it will, like if you dump an anaerobic onto a plant
Si
directly,
agregan esa anaeróbica a la planta
might
directamente,
die, might get mold,
el
might
materia
have
de
a lot
planta
of
puede
problems. But within like 3 to
morirse
4
o
months,
causar problemas.
the
Pero en unos meses luego de
ecosystem
eso, el
around that,
ecosistema
where you
alrededor
dumped that
de
anaerobic bacteria,
ese
will then
charco o esa
transform
bacteria anaeróbica
into something good.
se transformaría en
But
algo
if you're trying to
positivo.
feed a crop,
Si
you
uno
don't
está
want
tratando de
that. You don't want to
alimentar
wait 3
un
or 4
cultivo,
months.
uno no va a
If you
querer
have time,
esperar 3 o 4
like my
meses.
dad used to ferment all kinds of nasty stuff,
Mi
and it would
papá,
just
por
be this
ejemplo,
really like putrid
fomentaba
smell. And if
aguas
you
que
dump it
tenían
out on his trees,
un
the
olor
trees would
muy
struggle for a little
espantoso.
bit, and then
Se le echaba a
months
los
later the
árboles,
trees would be
batallaban
spent
los árboles y
off
meses
because
después
the environment changes the anaerobics back into other things, and the anaerobics get eaten by the protozoas and the nematodes. But it's not what we're going for here. So what we're doing is aerobic. So aerobic is like a river. Essentially, the best way to explain compost tea in nature is when a flood happens, you have all this nutrient-dense humus from the mountains and old plants and stuff like that are all getting washed up, and they get turned, and lots of air mixing them, and then there's worm castings getting mixed in from the mountains and everything, and then you get this flood of like nutrient-dense, basically water that comes down from the mountains. A lot of times it does more destruction than good because it'll wipe out things that we need. But essentially what we're trying to mimic here is similar to a flood, where there's just a bunch of microbes and a bunch of plants getting mixed in, bubbled,
son mezcladas ahí
and some dead fish
con peces
basically,
muertos, básicamente. Y
and
hay
then there's humic acid, which
no también
up in
ácido
these
humano,
mountains, there's
que en
actually
esas
lots of
montañas,
pockets
de hecho,
of
hay
humic acid. There's a name
mucho
for
de
the
ese humic acid,
crystal. I was just
y
looking
hay un
that
nombre
up.
particular para el cristal.
Nope. One second. Screenshot of that. No, I did. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, humic has fulvic acid and
Humic
humin in
tiene
it.
ácido humano
And
y
leonardite
leonardite,
is what it's
que es
in the
lo que
mountains. And this stuff here was
gas
found
montañas.
outside of Taos. I'll pass this around too. So
Esto puede
kind of get an
encontrarse aquí
idea
en la zona
before
fuera de Taos.
I use it up.
Se mezcla.
This is found outside of Taos, and when my friend found it, he was selling this for years. For
Mi
tons of money. I
colega
don't know where he
estuvo
disappeared,
vendiéndose
but
por años, no
I
sé dónde lo
stockpiled
encontró.
quite a bit of it. It's really potent. So his stuff is like 80 something, 85% humic acid.
De
And
ácido
so inside the humic acid, there's fulvic acid
húmico,
and
dentro de ese
there's
gas húmico
humin, which are also
hay gas
really important.
de ácido y gas
What
humano.
humic acid does
Lo que hace el humic
at a
acid,
base
el ácido
level
húmico
is,
a nivel de base es
humic acid basically is kind of like the
ácido húmico,
lubricant for the
es
cell
como el
wall
lubricante
to all
para
life, to
la
plant
pared de la
life, to tree
célula.
life. You can buy humic acid to take internally, like extracts of it that are like food grade. It basically coats the cell wall, giving it kind of oil to the key
La pared de la
nutrients,
célula hacia sus
amino
nutrientes,
acids,
los ácidos
vitamins that
aminos y
are
las
absorbing into
vitaminas
your cell wall,
entran en la
into the
pared de la
plant cell
célula.
wall. So when you have humic acid,
Cuando hay
it's not so much a food for
gas
the
húmico,
microbes.
no solamente alimentas para el
Well,
microbio,
it helps the microbes, but it
ayuda a los
also helps
microbios,
them
pero también
absorb
ayuda a ellos a
nutrients,
absorberlo.
right? So the more humic acid in your
Y
soil,
más,
the microbes, the mushrooms, pretty much everything is able to absorb more nutrition and then thrive more and do its job better, essentially. So that's why we use humic acid in compost tea. It definitely does miracles in many ways, and makes the cell walls a lot stronger to handle resistance against pests. So bacteria,
bacteria,
beneficial, non-beneficial.
la bacteria
When you're
beneficiante y no
doing
beneficiante,
aerobic,
cuando trabajan con
you're pretty much
producto
always
aeróbico,
beneficial. It's kind of hard to create a
es un
non-beneficial,
poco
except if you let this sit
algo
for like
no
3
beneficiante.
or 4 days, you might start
Si dura
getting into a
por
place
3
where it
4
doesn't
días,
smell right. If
tal
we
vez
do
llega
this
un
right
punto en
today,
el que no
tomorrow
esté
this should smell actually
ideal.
really good.
Aunque
Right
tenga
away
mal
it's gonna
olor
smell
ahora,
like fish
puede tener
and
mejor
seaweed,
olor
this
mañana.
weird ocean smell. And then after
Y
like
luego
tomorrow, it
de
should smell like more
mañana
a fresh breeze
Debía tener
on
uno
the
más
ocean,
como...
or maybe even a fresh breeze in the mountains if you're using more mountain-based stuff. I got the soluble seaweed and this fish, which are both ocean-based, so it's going to smell a little bit more like a fresh breeze on the ocean versus a swamp of rotting fish on the ocean. So if it smells like bad, then we know it's bad. But Bob was saying there's been some therapeutic uses for the smell of nature like that, like creating this kind of scent that can actually do all kinds of therapy for people. I don't really understand what he meant by that, but he was talking about that last time. But I definitely feel it when I know my tea's good when I can smell it and I'm like, oh wow, that smells great, you know. And if it doesn't smell super good, it doesn't mean it's bad necessarily, but you may not want to directly feed it onto a plant. You might want to like feed it in some soil that you let sit for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then feed it to the plants. Would be the other route with that. Worm castings are filled with nematodes, a little bit of protozoa, actually a good amount of protozoa, and tons of bacteria, beneficial bacteria. All these things are really important. So how the soil food web is basically the nematodes eat the fungus
los
and
hongos
the protozoa,
y a los protozoas.
and the protozoa will eat the
La
bacteria
protozoa va a consumir las
and
bacterias
the nematodes.
y a los nematodos.
And so they're all like kind of eating each other.
Entonces están como en un
And
círculo,
when they
todos
do that, they're
consumiéndose.
excreting
Cuando hacen
nitrogen
eso, están produciendo
and micronutrients that the plants need. So it's like this whole environment that's happening underground where they're basically all eating each other, feeding each other, and creating like a perfect web of nutrition and basically perfect environment for the plants to thrive at their highest potential.
máximo.
One thing that I found really interesting is
Algo
Elaine
interesante
Nieman,
que he
because of her
encontrado,
work, she was able to prove
Endin,
to
a
like
través de su trabajo,
distillers,
pudo comprobar,
strawberry company, berry company,
tuvo una
that they
compañía de
can make
moras y fresas, y
2 to
ellos
3
pudieron
times
producir
more strawberries
2 a 3 veces
and
más
have
cantidad
better
de
flavor,
fresas que
more
tengan
dark
mejor sabor,
colors in the strawberries and
colores
raspberries,
más oscuros para sus
than the
fresas,
hydroponic systems that they're using prior.
comparado al
So Driscoll's went
sistema
from like
hidropónico que ellos están
massive
utilizando actualmente
hydroponic systems in the early
y
2000s.
sistemas hidropónicos grandes
Around
que tenían en la década
2010, they got
2000.
rid of
En
everything. They
2010
went full compost tea
deshicieron de
for all
eso
their stuff.
y
Even right now,
comenzaron a
you can
trabajar con equipo de
buy
compost
compost tea now.
completo
And
para tener mejor producción.
how that works is again, they
¿Cómo eso funciona?
feed
De vuelta,
the
ellos
NPK,
alimentan
they feed
el
nitrogen,
NPK,
phosphorus,
alimentan
potassium that the plant
nitrógeno,
needs,
fósforo y potasio que
you know,
necesitan las
like almost
plantas,
like a clinical IV or
como
something,
hay
to give
un
it
IV
exactly
clínico
what it needs for the
de lo
plant,
que
but it never
requiere
actually
en la
gives it
planta
fully what it
y
needs.
nunca
So
le da
then they
esa alimentación
compost tea it,
total.
it actually breaks
Dan
down
el
all
té de
that
compost
stuff
y
and
eso
then it
quiebra
feeds it to the
toda
plant.
esa materia,
But
se
then
lo
when they
alimenta
put
luego a
the
las
NPK
plantas.
back in, the salts will
Cuando
kill a
ponen el
lot of
NPK
the
de vuelta a la
bacteria
sal,
and the biology.
eso
So they're
mata
rotating
mucho de
between
la biología.
microbial extracts,
Mezclan
compost
ahí
tea,
entre
and
compost, microbios, víctor de
a lot of
compost.
the apple companies.
Muchos
I don't know if you guys remember like how big an apple was, or 10 minutes. Okay. Apples and stuff and fruits that were organic were actually a lot smaller. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Like in the early 2000s, they were actually not as big. They're a lot, like more dangly and smaller fruits and stuff. And since the compost tea has been integrated into mass agriculture across California, especially, and Washington, all the fruits are getting way bigger and a lot more nutrient dense and more flavorful. And organic, actually, you can taste the difference more so than you used to. Yeah, so that's my own personal thing. I'm going to quickly just kind of show everyone what we're doing here. So I got this soluble seaweed, and we're going to put this in this water here. And so we want this to bubble for, if we're over 90 degrees outside, 12 hours is max. If we're between 75 and 90, 24 hours is good. Under 75 to like, it's like 60 to 75, you can bubble it for 72 plus hours, and or no, 42 plus hours, and then 72. If you're like down to 40 degrees to like 60, you want to bubble it for around 72. So we're just going to
Mezclarlo
do it
por
with
72.
bubble. It's
Vamos a hacer
probably
una
going to get
mezcla
a
de
little warm
24
in the
horas.
heat, so the
Va a
microbes
conectarse
will
un
be
poco
taking
con
that pretty well.
la luz del sol para que el microbio pueda absorberlo de buena manera.
Pour that in there. And I'm gonna. So each
Y cada
a lot of people that do compost
muchas
for
personas
your
que hacen
food,
el té de compost,
and I didn't bring the right screens,
yo no
unfortunately.
traje
Based on getting the
las
right
áreas indicadas aquí
mesh. But if you want to
para
for your
mostrar
food,
eso.
you want to
Si
make
uno
sure this
quiere
is well
limitar
meshed.
eso, uno quiere
So
asegurarse que tenga buena
if
mezcla.
anyone does collect this tomorrow,
Si
make
alguien
sure
recolecta esto mañana,
that they
asegúrense de
screen
que
it if they're going to
ellos
use foliage.
evalúan
And
para ver
foliage
si
is
van a
super
hacer
important. You
foliage.
want to get
Foliage es
microbes
clave
on both
porque van a querer
sides,
tener microbios en
especially the
ambos
bottom
lados,
side of a leaf.
prácticamente en la parte inferior de la hoja.
If you add trichoderma in
Si uno
there,
agrega
it
trichoderma
can
ahí,
dominate,
eso puede
which is
dominar
not necessarily mycorrhiza, but it's very similar.
un poco similar a la
It's really
microalga,
manure. Oftentimes when you see
que va en la
manure
parte como
pile,
del
you'll
abono.
find like a
En
bunch
las
of powdery or
filas de abonos a
blue,
veces
gray,
hay
powdery
como
stuff growing on the
un
manure.
polvo
That's
azul
trichoderma.
gris que crece
And
allí.
you can actually
Eso es
screen
trichoderma
that off,
y
try to
uno
get as
puede
least
quitar
manure.
eso,
You
eliminarlo
get this powder from there, Bob
para
bought
quitar
this,
ese polvo,
and you can add it
hacerlo en
into your
compost
compost tea and
y
you get
agregar la
trichoderma.
cesta de
That's
compost.
really good for this
Eso es
desert
algo bueno
environment
para
'cause
este
it's
ambiente
dominant.
aquí de
If you're
desierto.
like up in the mountains,
Si
I
uno está
wouldn't
en
be
las
adding
sierras,
trichoderma because
yo
it could dominate some of
no
your
agregaría
natural
tricoderma porque
environment.
eso puede
Instead,
dominar
I
el
would go
ambiente natural.
gather
Yo en
underneath the
vez iría a
healthiest tree,
recolectar bajo el
the
árbol más
healthiest
saludable
bush. Like
y en los
the
arbustos
tree
más
again is going to
saludables.
have
El
the
árbol va a tener el áquido,
mycorrhizas that are in there
maquillas que están ahí
naturally, or
naturalmente,
the bush like
o
you
el
see a field of
arbusto,
grass and some
como
of
si
the grass
ven
is taller, maybe there's like a
mucho
huge
pasto
alfalfa
y
plant.
hay como una planta de
Dig around
alfalfa
that,
grande
'cause you're
en
going to
esa
find some
zona,
beneficial
pasto más alto.
mushrooms, beneficial
Vayan a excavar allí, van a encontrar
mycelium,
el micelio.
mycorrhizas, protozoas, everything is already happening under that healthy plant, right? And you take a couple, like a quart of that soil. Oftentimes you'll see, I'm gonna pass this around. This is like a mix of possibly a local trichoderma to my neighborhood, but definitely a bunch of mycelium that was growing under this like webbing. The white powdery stuff can be mycelium. It could be a bunch of different things that are beneficial, but it's definitely what you're going for. You're going for this kind of like rotten compost. Everyone's seen it, I'm sure, when they've moved forest floors. So we're trying to get that in our local neighborhood, the healthiest in your local environment, tree or grass plot or like bush. Search under that, find a good amount. Don't take it all because the plants need it there. And just try to take around a quart or get it from multiple areas in your area. And then that's what we're going to be multiplying. The mushrooms don't multiply so much in here, but they don't die. The nematodes don't multiply in here, but they don't die, but they get well dispersed when they're dispersed out, right? With the liquid versus doing a powder or a small inoculation thing. So we're going to do basically, we're doing like a half cup to a cup of soluble seaweed, a quart of the mushroom compost that's ideally local to your region, and then a half cup of humic acid. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in here, get it absorbing. And then a half cup to a cup. It really depends on how much you have and what you can afford. And then we're going to do
Y
a
luego
cup
vas a
of
hacer
fish
un
hydroxylate.
vaso
I'll
ahí
add that at the very end.
de
'Cause I don't
hidróxido
wanna
de
touch
pez.
that. It'll smell like fish all day. It's hard
Lo
to
voy a hacer
wash.
al final para que no producir
Really
este olor
disgusting smell.
tan
But
potente
it will
y
transform once it
asqueroso.
goes into the tea, which is
Y
super
también
good.
eso va a ayudar a transformar esta mezcla.
Is there any questions before
Preguntas antes de que
we go too far?
avancemos.
What'd you say? So it's fish hydroxylate. You want to do
Hidróxido de
a
pez,
cup,
uno va a querer utilizar un vaso
55
completo
gallons.
hasta
So if
55.
you're doing a 5-gallon, I would say like
Si van a hacer una mezcla de 5 galones, yo
4
diría
tablespoons maybe,
unas
or
4
something like that,
cucharadas.
or even a couple tablespoons. Soluble seaweed. You
Algas
definitely have to have a
solubles.
bubbler. Want that bubbling. A quart of
para que
worm
pueda
castings,
mezclarse
I
y generar
recommend.
burbujas.
Some people say a half a cup.
Algunas
I
personas
think
dicen
that's
que
nearly enough, in
medio
my opinion.
vaso, pero a veces no es suficiente
But
eso.
yeah, I usually use about a quart of
Usualmente yo
liquid
utilizo un
mixture if you
cuarto
have your own
de la
worm
envoltura,
castings,
si
or
tienen su propio
a regular worm
cuarto,
casting.
un cuarto ahí de materias
And then
locales,
a cup of
y
humic
luego un
acid
vaso de ácido málico
and a cup of
y un vaso
seaweed
de algas
for 55.
por 55
You could do a half cup.
por vaso.
It's kind of
Puede ser
variable.
medio
I mean,
vaso
it really
también.
depends on.
Va a
I would
depender
experiment
mucho
and see what you like
en
the
eso.
most
Yo
and what really
experimentaría
works for
para ver
your garden.
qué método
You'll
más les
notice
gusta
a difference right away
y
if you're
notarán
bubbling.
directamente una
You can
diferencia.
also do this without a bubbler,
También pueden hacer eso
and just
sin
by
mezclador,
mixing all this stuff
simplemente
into a
mezclando
bucket
todo
and
eso en
then
una
add the
cubeta,
mycorrhiza, mix it in really
agregando
well,
microalga
and dump it on your plants. But you're not
y
going to
echándolo en
see
sus
a
plantas.
quick difference. You're not going to see
Pero no
those
van a ver una
spikes.
diferencia
You're
rápida
going to
en
see a
ese
difference
crecimiento.
within like about
Ver
a
una
week
diferencia más como en
for
una
all to
semana
do its work
para que
in the
todo
soil.
pueda mezclarse bien.
If you were to grow mycorrhiza, it's
Si
a
pueden
whole
producir
different thing. You can
mycorrhiza,
look it up online, but you
es
can
algo totalmente
grow
distinto.
mycorrhiza in
Uno
your
puede
local
generar mycorrhiza
environment by
cultivando
feeding
ahí
it
en su
oats
alimento local,
and molasses.
alimentándole
Apparently,
molasses y avena.
I haven't done this yet, but
Y aún no he
so you
probado
use a
hacer
closed bin,
haciendo
just
esto.
kind of turn it, keep it
Hay
out of
que
the sun.
cerrarlo,
You'll
almacenarlo,
see the mycorrhiza
mantenerlo fuera de
grow
la luz del
into
sol
these like
para ver la
webs,
democracia, cómo crecen en estas
looking for
redes,
roots, essentially.
con las raíces.
Some people do it once a year if they're not feeding fertilizer to it. If you're using fertilizer, I would do it after the fertilizing. You fertilize and then do it a little bit after. It's always better to wet your ground really well before adding this because it'll go deeper. If it just gets this much of the soil, the sun's going to kill most of what you just put in. So you want your soil to be fairly wet before, or you dilute this. As a ganja grower, I've done it weekly. I've even done it to the point where like I didn't even do water because I was doing so well with it. But now it's like financially this doesn't make sense, or physical time doesn't make sense. 5 minutes. So yeah, now I put the humic acid in here, shake that up a little bit. Let's see, I got a stick. Is there anything I haven't talked about? I'm adding a little bit of these guys' local shilajit, because shilajit also has humic acid in it and a bunch of micronutrients.
Y
It
puede
doesn't
ser los
hurt to
micronutrientes.
add things like that.
No
There's
le
a
lastima.
ton of other things that you could find out there in the world that, maybe gold or silver you can throw in there, whatever you really want to add into your soil. But if you're just doing it for like local reasons, you don't really need to do that. The main thing I think is making sure you have a healthy amount of mycelium and a really good worm castings. I don't prefer this. This is just what I was available to get. Where I was at is this type of worm casting. It's better to get ones that are like, these guys will use cardboard and stuff to feed the worms. It's better to get like, more high quality, but this is fairly high quality for what we have available. They add a lot of sand to it too, which is kind of lame. So at the bottom of the brewer, I'll end up with a bunch of sand. So I usually use about a quart or a couple handfuls, which is similar for me, 2 big handfuls. And yeah, you can kind of, if anyone wants to look at the worm castings, they can come see, how much sand they put in it too. But you want those like nice little balls. Sometimes you find,
A veces uno puede
you'll find
encontrar
it in the mountains.
en
I've
las
found
montañas.
one of my favorite
Y he
places to
encontrado
gather.
unos sitios
Anyone
favoritos
can
para
find like a
recordar
100-year-old mill.
como un molino de
Because
100
back in the day,
años.
National Forest had mills
Previamente en National
all
no
over the fucking
tenía
place. If you
molinos en
find one of
todas
those
partes.
spots,
Si
like on an
encuentra
old
uno de
map,
esos lugares en el
that
mapa,
is like a mill can
un
inoculate
molino puede inocular
probably a whole state.
para todo un
Insane.
estado
Because there's like
entero.
sometimes like 20 feet
A veces
deep
hay como 20 pies
of just worm
totales
castings
de
and mushroom
de
compost that
capas
can
y
grow over the
compost de
years.
hongos
It's
y
the
de
best humus
raíces.
you can probably get.
Es básicamente la
Really good
mejor
humus in the
humus que
mountains is
uno puede
also really
obtener
good to add
en
in,
montañas.
about a quart to
Siempre ahí es buena
55.
idea agregar como cuarto de
Mushroom
la mezcla
compost, same thing.
55. Lo mismo para la mezcla de hongos.
Usually I'll put this in a bag and I'll squeeze the
Usualmente
worm
pongo
castings
eso
like and really like make sure it doesn't drop. And it becomes like a nice like brew. I'm just kind of putting it at the bottom, and I'm just gonna kind of massage it like this, kind of getting the tea to break down into like a nice black slime. I want the water to look as dark as I can get it, so I'll just massage it for a while. Definitely easier with what they call a brewer bag, or you can use paint bags. They don't last as long. They kind of get eaten up by the microbes. But a lot of people will put the tea bag, and they'll hang the tea bag in here and let it brew after you massage it really well. The massaging is super important though. They did studies on whether you can not massage it or do massage it. You're going to get easy 10 to 100 times more biology in there. The cool thing about bacteria is like every 15 minutes, the handfuls of the beneficials that I put in here are gonna double every 15 minutes. So within 24 hours, you're already, and that's at a temperature of like 70 to 90, but they still will double pretty fast. And you're gonna literally 100-fold is what generally happens. You can also, my friend used to have a microscope, and we would like take tea samples and soil samples and like lay it out in these little flats, and we'd be able to see the protozoa count, the nematode count, and the bacteria. The bacteria, you don't really know what it is, but you just know it's bacteria because of these little dots. But the nematodes and the protozoas you can fully see. Is there any other questions before I wrap it up?
Va a querer ponerlo directamente ahí en su
I
barril.
would do an extract first.
Yo haría primero una
Like
extracción.
a horsetail extract, where you let it sit
Una extracción,
for
dejar que se mezcle ahí
48 hours, let it get
48 horas,
or maybe even more.
que
You can probably
obtenga
let
más
it sit
oxígeno,
let it get
otra vez
aerobic
una semana, si puede ser necesario
put
más
it in
tiempo.
first.
Agréganlo
And then
primero, antes que nada,
aerobic
y la
atmosphere,
atmósfera
air bubbling,
aeróbica, el aire
or
con
maybe even
burbujas,
put
ayudan a
aerobic
producir
in a
eso,
bucket and just get it
permitir que
aerobic,
se mezcle,
and then you add it. After it's been
y luego
aerated for
agrega
probably like
lo
6
que
to
haya
12 hours,
tenido oxígeno por
then you're
10
having
a
very
16 horas. Uno va a
to
tener,
get a good extraction, you want to go more anaerobic, which is
para tener buena
interesting.
extracción,
So
uno va a querer
you
tener
want to
menos
let it sit
oxígeno,
even in the sun and get it like fermenting, and then you bubble it, and that will
fermentándose ahí
kind of get rid
frente
of
al
anything
sol
that's not beneficial.
para que
And then you
elimine
put
las
that in
partes
your
ensuciantes,
barrel.
y luego uno puede agregarlo ahí a su
Or you
barril,
put it in the barrel first and then
o
wait
puede
a little while
agregarlo
before you
inicialmente
add
al barril
the mushroom compost.
para que se mezcle con el
It's
compost de
definitely
hongos.
good for you.
Luego que se acabe, ¿cuánto tiempo tiene que estar ahí el barril? Hay
Yeah,
que dejar que
so
entre
if it's
aire.
really hot out, you
Si
don't
está
got much
muy
time. If
caluroso
it's
afuera,
like
no tiene mucho
70
tiempo.
degrees,
Si están a
like how it
70
is now,
grados,
we'd
o como
probably
estamos
get
ahora,
a day out of it if I
tal
turned
vez
off
un
the
día,
boiler.
si yo apago el mezclador.
After, you really only got like
Esencialmente uno tiene,
3 to 5 hours.
tenemos
It's
como
really
3 a
nothing.
5 horas.
Ideally right away.
Eso sería idealmente
Because
casi inmediatamente,
aerobic
porque
bacteria start
bacterias
dying
anaeróbicas
and
comienzan a
anaerobic start
morirse
forming.
y las anaeróbicas comienzan a formarse ahí.
Yep. So I got this really dark
Y aquí
now.
tengo esta
It's like
fuerte mezcla
black mud.
del lodo
I'm gonna put that in
negro,
there.
echando la mezcla al barril.
Any other questions?
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You could put more. Like it doesn't.
Uno puede
hurt to
agregarle
put more.
más, no lastima poner más.
Yeah, vermiculture doesn't always have a lot of castings as much as you want. I would double to quadruple the amount of vermiculture if you don't see like black balls and like really black soil in your vermiculture, then I would put more. What'd you say? Screens. Yeah, they lay out screens and cardboard. They feed it. It's really weird process that what these guys do. I've looked into their company. There's better brands that don't add sand and don't feed it cardboard. But yeah. Yeah. You can. You can, like oftentimes I would dilute like a gallon into a 5-gallon bucket. you could dilute that up to like probably 10 times the amount of water. So you could do 500 gallons for that amount right there. Especially if you're doing an agricultural plot or you're
Podríamos
looking
decir
at
hacer una
just a
parcela
field or a
agrícola.
lawn, it's probably better to dilute, and it's also make sure you pre-water before doing a large, like if you're doing a large
también.
plot. It's best to always pre-water because it's going to go deeper. But yeah, it can be diluted and quite a bit. But yeah, again, definitely don't leave it in the barrel for more than 72. 72, a lot of people prefer. 48 is what I like. 24 works. This will be a 24 tomorrow by the time people grab it.
So this will be bubbling, like you said, for the next 24 hours?
Yeah, correct.
We can come back around tomorrow after the first demonstration to 11:30, and Trey will be out there and available for more questions, more dialogue, containers, water bottles that we're going to have, or control. We'd love to start on YouTube. Yeah, there'll be more opportunity for direct dialogue tomorrow, and of course you can just find us. But
Yeah, I'll be around. I'll be checking on this frequently, and I don't mind walking over here. If anyone has questions, we can come look at the products. I can tell you other products I recommend and or how to make these products is the ideal thing. Yeah. Cool. Thank you all.